A gunman bought her last hat. Then the richest man in town panicked. By noon, the town had bought whiskey, flour, horseshoe nails, 2 bolts of calico, and a coffin hinge. But no one had bought shade. 5 hand-woven hats sat on Lin Yao's crate outside the assay office in Bitter Dune, Arizona territory. They were made from tule reeds she had cut before sunrise along a muddy bend of the San Pedro River. Soaked, split, cured. Woven until each brim held its shape like a quiet promise. They were not pretty in the way the town understood pretty. No silk ribbon, no silver buckle, no swagger. But under the white hammer of the desert sun, they gave a man's eyes, neck, and sense. The town did not care. Men in sweat-dark felt hats passed close enough to brush dust onto her display. Ranch wives crossed the street before they reached her crate. A boy stopped once, touched the edge of a brim, and was yanked away by his mother as if the hat might bite. Lin sat with her hands folded in her lap. She was 26, a widow for 11 months, and had learned that stillness was safer than pleading. Her late husband, Hao, had left her 3 things: a small claim north of town, a tin box of survey papers, and a promise that the land would matter one day. To everyone else, it was a patch of stone and salt bush. To Lin, it's in America, where his voice still felt close. Beside the hats, in a blue saucer with a cracked rim, lay 1 nickel and a bent brass button. That was all a week of heat had earned her. The shadow arrived before the man. It fell across the hats, long and clean, cutting the sun from her hands. Lin looked up and saw Silas Mercer standing over her crate. Mercer owned the freight yard, the water wagons, and most of the town's debts. He wore a pale linen coat that somehow stayed clean in a town where dust seemed to grow out of the air. His beard was trimmed to a point, and his smile had the patient cruelty of a man who never needed to raise his voice. "Mrs. Lin," he said, "still selling river baskets for heads?" "They are shade hats," she answered. "I'm sure they are." His eyes moved over the display without interest. "Your assessment payment is due Monday. County rules do not bend for sentiment." Lin kept her face still. "It would grieve me," Mercer continued, "to see your husband's little claim fall into careless hands." He tipped his hat and walked away. Only when he was gone did Lin let her fingers close around the edge of the crate. Monday was 4 days away. The fee was $8. 1 button and 5 hats no one would touch. Then the horse limped into town. It came from the south in a brown cloud, head low, left forelegs stiff. The rider did not hurry it. He sat loose in the saddle, not careless, not weak, just economical, like every movement had been paid for in pain at some earlier time. The conversations along the boardwalk thinned. The blacksmith stopped hammering. A card game visible through the saloon window went still. Lin knew enough about frontier towns to understand silence. It was rarely given to the harmless. The rider stopped at the livery and swung down. His hat was ruined, the crown crushed, the brim torn almost in half. When he removed it, the sun struck a lean, weathered face, with tired eyes and a mouth that looked unused to explanation. He handed the reins to the stable boy, said something too low for Lin to hear, and then turned toward the street. His gaze passed over the saloon, the bank, the freight office. Then it found her crate. For a moment, he simply looked at the hats. Then he walked straight toward her. No one followed. No one spoke. Lin felt the whole town watching from behind windows, posts, curtains, and cowardice. The man stopped before her. His shadow covered the hats now. Hand hung near his belt, but not on the pistol. His left hand, Lin noticed, was scarred across the knuckles, the little finger crooked, as if it had been broken badly and allowed to heal by stubbornness alone. He lifted the widest hat with surprising care. The reeds whispered against his thumb. "Who made this?" he asked. "I did." He turned it over, studying the tight crown, the even stitching, the slight downward sweep of the brim. "Good work." The words were plain. That made them more dangerous. In Bitter Dune, kindness was usually decorated before it struck. "How much?" he asked. Lin swallowed. $2.50. A man on the boardwalk laughed under his breath. The rider did not. He reached into his vest, drew out 3 silver dollars, and placed them in the cracked blue saucer. The coin struck with a sound so solid that Lin felt it in her ribs. "Keep the change," he said. Then he put the hat on. The brim settled low over his eyes. The pale reeds threw shade across the face every man in town seemed afraid to look at directly. Someone whispered, "That's Caleb Rusk." The name moved faster than wind. Caleb Rusk, the left-handed gunman from Yuma, the man who had ended a range war in 1 afternoon, and wanted in 2 counties, and welcomed in none, depending on which liar was speaking. Caleb turned away with Lin's hat on his head, and left his ruined felt hat lying in the dust. For 10 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then a rancher stepped down from the boardwalk. "Ma'am," he said, unable to meet her eyes, "you got another one like his?" Within an hour, Lin sold all 5 hats. By sundown, men who had ignored her for months were asking when she could weave more. A stage driver bought one for the road. A miner bought one for his brother. A dry goods clerk, who had once refused to let Lin touch cloth before paying, asked whether she could make a smaller brim for his wife. Lin packed her empty crate with more money in the saucer than she had seen since Howe's funeral. It should have felt like mercy. Instead, it felt like a door had opened in a house full of enemies. She saw Caleb again near the blacksmith's forge. He sat on a water barrel while his horse was being tended, her hat tilted low, his scarred left hand resting on his knee. He looked neither proud nor pleased, just tired. Lin started toward the alley behind the laundry, where she rented a narrow room. She had taken only 3 steps when 2 men blocked her path. One was Orrin Pike, Mercer's freight foreman, broad as a stove and twice as blackened. The other was a wiry man named Dobb, whose laugh always arrived before his thoughts. "Well now," Orrin said, "Bitter Dune's got itself a famous hat lady." Dobb leaned toward her crate. "You weave one for rattlesnakes too, or just killers?" Lin held the crate tighter. "Excuse me," she said. Orrin hooked a finger under the rope handle and jerked. The crate fell. Coins scattered into the dirt. One of the hats she had kept for pattern making slipped out and rolled beneath a wagon wheel. Dobb laughed. She could stop herself, gathering coins with shaking fingers. She would not cry, not in front of them, not where Mercer's windows could see. A quiet voice cut through the street. "Pick it up." Orrin turned. Caleb Rusk stood beside the forge, still wearing the reed hat. He had not drawn his gun. That made the town more afraid, not less. Orrin spat. "This ain't your business. You made it mine when you put your hands on her property." Dobb's fingers drifted toward the knife on his belt. Caleb looked at him once. Dobb's hands stopped. Orrin stepped forward, grinning because he was bigger, because bigger men often confuse size with permission. "Planning to shoot me over a China woman's basket?" "No," Caleb said. "I'm planning to watch you pick it up." Orrin swung. It was a hard punch, meant to crack bone and finish the matter in front of witnesses. Caleb moved only enough for the fist to miss. His scarred left hand caught Orrin's wrist. His shoulder turned. His boot shifted half an inch. Orrin's own weight carried him forward. He hit the horse trough face first. The splash reached the boardwalk. Nobody laughed. Caleb's gaze moved back to Dob. The crate. Dob lifted it as if it were holy. Orrin came up choking, soaked from beard to belt, but his anger died the moment he saw Caleb's hand. That crooked little finger, those old white scars. And Lin saw something else. Across the street, Silas Mercer had stepped out of the freight office. His smile was gone. He was not looking at Caleb's pistol. He was staring at Caleb's left hand, the way a thief stares at a witness he thought was dead. That night, Lin found Caleb behind the livery, brushing desert grit from his horse's coat. He saw her and straightened. "I caused you trouble," he said. "You revealed trouble," Lin answered. "That is different." A faint line moved near his mouth. Been the beginning of a smile, if he had remembered how. She held out a folded cloth. Inside was his $3, less the price of the hat. "You paid too much." "No." "You did." "I paid what it was worth to me." Lin lowered the cloth. The livery lantern swung in the evening wind. Its light moved over Caleb's face, making him look older, then younger, then simply worn. "Mercer knows you," she said. Caleb's eyes went to the freight office at the end of the street. "He knew my father," he said, "back when Mercer called himself Silas Morrow." Lin waited. The story came slowly, as if each word had to be pulled from a locked drawer. Caleb's real name was Thomas Reed. His family had owned a small orchard outside Santa Fe. His father could read weather, soil, and grafting cuts, but not contracts. Silas Morrow had arrived with a ledger, a smile, and a promise of irrigation money. The loan papers hid penalties no honest man would imagine. When Thomas's father challenged them, Morrow's men beat him in the yard and broke Thomas's hand for reaching for a rifle. The orchard was taken in court. His mother died before spring. Silas Morrow vanished west with a new name. Thomas Reed became Caleb Rusk, because a man with nothing left is easy for rumor to rename. Lin looked at the crooked finger, then at the hat on his head. "My husband said papers can steal faster than guns," she said. He was right. Howe was a railroad surveyor before he laid track on maps more than promises from men. For the first time, Caleb looked directly at her with something sharper than politeness. "Your land," he said. "Mercer wants it." "Yes." "Why?" Lin hesitated. For 11 months she had told no one. A secret could protect you. It could also bury you. She thought of Mercer's smile, Orrin's hand on her crate, the marshal who ate dinner in Mercer's kitchen twice a week. Then she thought of Caleb buying the hat without shame, wearing it before the town, forcing them to see the work they had refused. "My husband marked a seep spring on the north edge of our claim," she said. "Underground water, small but steady. Said if it were dug properly, it could feed a well through the dry months." Caleb went still. Lin continued. "Mercer owns the water wagons. If the railroad spur comes through Bitter Dune, he will need a permanent water source. He has been waiting for me to miss the assessment." "And if you do?" "He takes the claim for taxes. Then he owns the water. Everyone pays him forever." The lantern creaked overhead. Caleb said, "Do you have proof?" Lin pulled a folded survey sheet from inside her sleeve. It was old, softened at the creases, Howe's neat pencil marks still visible, slope lines, dry wash, stone outcrop, and one small circle labeled in Chinese characters beside a cross-section of water depth. Lin held it out. Caleb did not take it at first. "That paper is your land," he said. "No," Lin answered. "The land is my land. This is only the truth. Truth does nothing while it is hidden in my box." He accepted the paper with both hands. The next morning, Mercer sent the law. Marshal Voss came to Lin's rented room with a stamped notice and a face arranged into boredom. According to the paper, Hao Lin had co-signed a freight debt for $75. The signature looked almost like his, if a person had never seen him write. Payment was due in 48 hours. Failure would transfer the claim to Silas Mercer, holder of the debt. Lin read it once, then again. Fear opened inside her like a cellar door. $75 might as well have been $7,000. The marshal knew it. Mercer knew it. The town knew it. Papers had come dressed as law, and law had come carrying theft. For 1 hour, Lin sat in her room with the notice on her knees. Then she stood. She did not pack. She did not run. She took the tin box, walked through the center of town, and entered the telegraph office. Caleb was already there. So was the telegraph clerk, a thin young man with ink on his cuffs and terror in his eyes. On the counter lay 3 things: Howe's survey sheet, a copy of Mercer's lien notice, and an old newspaper clipping from Santa Fe naming Silas Morrow in a disputed orchard foreclosure. Caleb had added a 4th item, a sworn statement written in a careful hand that did not sound like a gunman at all. "I can send it to Tucson," the clerk whispered. "Land office relay goes from there." "Send it to Tucson," Caleb said. "Then send it to the territorial attorney. Then send it to the railroad water surveyor in Benson." The clerk swallowed. "Mr. Line." Lin placed every coin from her hat sales on the counter. "Today," she said. "I do." The wire went out before noon. By evening, Mercer knew. He crossed the street himself this time. No foreman, no marshal. The whole town watched from a distance as he stopped before Lin and Caleb outside the telegraph office. Mercer's voice was low enough that only they could hear. "You have mistaken attention for power," he said to Lin. Lin's heart hammered. Her hands stayed still. "No," she said. "I mistook silence for safety. I will not do that again." Mercer's eyes moved to Caleb. "And you? Being behind another man's name?" Caleb stepped closer, but his hand did not move toward his gun. "You taught me what names are worth," he said. "Not much without proof." Mercer's face tightened. For a second, Bitter Dune seemed balanced on the edge of the old kind of ending. 2 men, 1 street, hands near weapons. Windows full of breathless people waiting for violence because violence was easier to understand than justice. Then the telegraph machine inside the office began to chatter. The clerk looked down at the incoming strip. His face changed. "Reply from Tucson," he called, voice breaking. "Federal review ordered." Transfer of the Lin claim pending investigation. Railroad surveyor instructed to inspect the water source. The street did not cheer. Not yet. It only exhaled. Mercer looked at the windows, the doors, the men who owed him money, the women who bought his water, the workers he had underpaid, the marshal who suddenly found the dirt very interesting. Power is not always destroyed in one blow. Sometimes it leaks out through the first crack. The federal inspector arrived 8 days later with a black valise, a measuring rod, and no interest in Silas Mercer's hospitality. The railroad surveyor came with him. Together they rode north to Lin's claim. Had marked, they dug through cracked earth and caliche. At 3 feet, the soil darkened. At 5 feet, it cooled. At 6 feet, water gathered in the hole. Clear as glass and stubborn as memory, the surveyor knelt, touched it, and looked back at Lin. "Year-round," he said. Those 2 words did what no pistol could have done. They changed the price of everything. Within a month, Mercer's lien was exposed as forged. 2 other families came forward with papers that looked suddenly suspicious. Then 5, then 11. Marshal Voss resigned before anyone had to ask him why. Mercer tried to sell his freight yard, but buyers had learned to read the fine print. By the first frost, Silas Mercer left Bitter Dune in a closed wagon before dawn. No one stopped him. Some men vanish because they are chased. Others vanish because the room has finally turned to look at them. Winter came gently that year. On the corner beside the assay office, where Lin's crate had once sat in dust, a narrow shop opened with a painted sign over the door, Lin and Reed Shade Works. Inside, reeds hung from rafters in pale bundles. Felt forms sat beside steaming kettles. Canvas brims dried near the stove. Ranchers came for wide hats that cooled the neck. Stage drivers came for brims that held against wind. Came for lighter shapes with clean stitching and practical grace. No one called them baskets anymore. They called them Lin hats. Some bought them because they worked. Some bought them because Caleb Rusk wore one. And some bought them because, in Bitter Dune, a reed hat had become a quiet declaration. Honest work was not small, and people ignored by power were not invisible. Caleb no longer corrected everyone who used his old name, but on the shop ledger, in careful black ink, he signed Thomas Reed. He built shelves, handled accounts, mended tack, and sometimes stood in the doorway watching the street as if expecting the past to come riding in. Less often now. Less. Lin kept Howe's survey sheet framed behind the counter, not as a relic, as a warning. Paper could steal. Paper could also testify. One evening, after the last customer left, Lin found Thomas in the workroom holding the first hat he had bought from her. The brim was stained now, softened by sun and sweat, a little frayed along the edge. "You should let me mend it," she said. He ran his thumb over the weave. "I like it this way." "It is worn." "It earned that." Lin smiled and returned to splitting reeds. Outside, the town lamps came on one by one. Beyond the buildings, on the claim Howe had left her, the new well turned under a wooden windlass. Water rose from the ground that Mercer had tried to steal, and filled a trough for horses, barrels for the shop, and buckets for neighbors who paid a fair price because Lin insisted fairness could be a habit if practiced long enough. Thomas hung the old hat by the door. For a long while neither of them spoke. They did not need to. The first time he had stepped to her crate, he had bought shade, but what he gave her was not rescue, and what she gave him was not shelter. She gave him proof that his past could be faced without becoming it. He gave her witness when the town had trained itself not to see. Together, they built something stronger than revenge. They built a place where truth had a roof, work had a name, and no honest person had to stand alone in the sun.